Yesterday we started talking about packaging and distribution, and then we started talking about the sandbox and production environments, right? Sandbox and deployments, basically, right? So as I told you, sandbox to production is pretty much similar to the way we do uh, packaging and distribution. All right. So as I was discussing in the last session, basically what happens, first of all, you'll have to create the things in the sandbox. You have to test them in the sandbox, and then you move it to the production. I cannot go and create anything on the production directly. Okay, if it's for something which does not affect other users, very small thing, then it's fine. Sometimes certain changes you can make in production directly, but anything which is going to affect the records, affect the users, that sort of thing should be first of all done in the sandbox, tested. Once it looks okay, then only it is moved to production. Okay, how it is moved to production? The process is very similar to packaging and distribution. All right, so you will create, you will put all these components inside. uh, you know Here we don't call it a package, here we call it a change set. For sandbox to production, there's something called a change set. We put all the components that we want to move to change set, and then we move them. Okay, so instead of package we use a change set here. Okay, fine. Now developer org does not have the sandbox option available, so you do not have a sandbox for the developer org that you have created, right? So you won't be able to go ahead and you do this sandbox to production in your developer org, all right? But don't need to worry, because whatever you need to know about the sandbox to production, moving things from sandbox to production, I'm going to tell you about those things, so there should not be a problem. All right. So, okay. So there are a few things that we need to understand. There are not too many things that we need to know here. There are very few things that we need to know. And if you know these things, if you listen to what I'm talking in like next 3 to 4 minutes, you will not have problem working on sandbox. Though you do not have access to a sandbox right now, but you will understand, whenever you have a sandbox, you will be able to work. Okay. So few things that we need to understand for a sandbox. One, the login URL. First is the login URL for the sandbox is test.salesforce.com. Okay. So if your company is using a sandbox, or if you have access to a sandbox, to log in into the sandbox, you will use test.salesforce.com. Usually to log in our developer or a production org, we use login.salesforce.com. For sandbox, you are going to use test.salesforce.com. Alright. So that's the login URL you are going to use to log in. Okay. Your username for sandbox becomes your actual username dot sandbox name. So this will be your production username dot sandbox name. So let's say your username in the production is g@abc.com and the sandbox name is s1. So this is going to be the username for the sandbox. Right? The username dot sandbox name. Okay, that's the second thing that you need to keep in mind. Now let's understand the process of moving things from sandbox to production. Okay, to move things from sandbox to production, first of all you go to the sandbox, develop whatever you want to use, just go ahead and develop that, then test it, do a proper testing whether your whatever you have developed is working fine, it looks good. Then once you feel that the components that you have created, you have tested them and you are ready to move them, then go to setup, deploy, change sets. Okay, go to setup, deploy, change sets, and in the change sets you have to click on outbound change set. Okay, there's an option of outbound change set. Click on that. Create a new change set. Now, from here the process becomes pretty similar to a package. Okay, there we were creating a package. Here we are creating a change set. So create a new change set. Name it. Let's say C1. Okay, now you can name it whatever. I'm just taking this C1 name so that I can show you how to or I can explain you how we implement this change set on the production environment. All right, so add components to the change set. The components that you want to transfer to the production environment, you just add those components, and finally upload. Okay, now go to production. You can log out of sandbox. Sandbox job is done. Now log in into production. In the production environment, you will straight away need to go to setup, deploy. In the setup menu, there is an option called deploy. You won't have this deploy option available in this developer org, but for sandbox you will have this, and for production environment, so any org which has got a sandbox will have this deploy option available. So you will just go to setup, deploy. Deploy, there is no change set. It should be outbound change set. Okay, under deploy there's going to be outbound change set, and then there is going to be inbound change set. Okay, now when you click on inbound change sets, you will get to see all the change sets which have been sent from the sandbox. All right, so you will get to see the list of those change sets. Out of this list, you will also get to see C1. Select C1, install it. That's it. That's all we have to do. Starting from sandbox, deploy things from the sandbox, get them into the production. That's it. Alright, so that's how a sandbox concept works. Alright, now for creating things on sandbox, the sandbox looks exactly the way your developer org looks or a production org looks. Okay, so you don't have to worry about how I'm going to work on sandbox. Everything is going to be created the same way you are working on a developer org. Okay, the same way you can create your custom objects, validations, workflows, approvals, triggers, visual force pages. So everything that you do in developer org, almost everything is going to be available in sandbox, and you will be able to create things or develop things the same way. All right, and once you are able to create those things, then once you feel that you have properly tested the sandbox, you are good to go and move it to the production. All right, okay. So now just for your understanding, I'll just give you a small scenario which is not basically about how things are moved, but how sandboxes are used by a company. I just give you a small scenario about that. Sometimes some certain companies can have a situation where a requirement where they have got a sandbox and they have got a production. Okay, now what happens? You will do the development here and you will do the testing also here, and then you move it to the production environment. Alright, so you have got one environment where the development and testing both are being done, and then once you are satisfied, you're moving it to the production environment. Right, that's what you do. But sometimes the companies may have a requirement of doing the testing on a different environment. Okay. The reasons can be, there can be several reasons. Like, your developer environment might not have that much of data or actual data where you want to do the testing. All right. So there can be a different team which is actually doing the testing. All right. So you just want to make sure that proper thorough testing is done before things are moved to production. All right. So there can be another scenario. There can be another development life cycle here. You can have a development sandbox. Then there can be a testing sandbox, and then there can be production. So there can be these three stages also. So things being developed here, they are being tested here, and then they are being moved to the production environment. So now this can also be the development life cycle. Okay, this is just for your understanding in case sometimes it happens that you are asked in your interview that how this development used to be done in your org and all that stuff. So just understand this. So some companies will be okay to do the development and testing in the same environment. Some companies would want the development to be done on one sandbox, testing to be done on another one, and then move it to production. All right. So in this case, if there is this kind of a life cycle, process remains same. All right. So here you know move the components from this to this, and then you move the components from here. Got it? Change set, outbound change set here, take it as an inbound in this one, and set as an outbound change set from here and take it as an inbound change set in this one. Alright, so that's how it works. Okay. Now the next concept that we're going to talk about is a site. Okay, so just before I get into that, as I told you, this sandbox, you do not have the sandbox thing available, right? But if you actually understand that packaging distribution concept, how components are being put in the package and then they are being uploaded, so if you understand that part, you should not have difficulty working with sandbox also. Just that the steps are different or the navigations are different, but more or less the concept remains same. Okay. Okay. Now the next concept that we're going to talk about is a site, force.com site. Okay, so what's a force.com site? Force.com site is basically a public site that you can create using Visual Force and Salesforce. Okay, public site is a website which is going to be available to everyone. Okay, so I'll give you a small requirement. Okay. Um, okay. Let's say we are running a staffing company. Okay, we have a small staffing company. Just give me one quick moment. One moment. I'll just be back. All right. So we were talking about a small requirement. What is the requirement? Let's say, we are running a staffing company. Okay. We have got, and we are managing all these, job requirements that we have within Salesforce. So we manage those candidates and the jobs within Salesforce. Okay. Now I want to display the jobs to public, because the data is in Salesforce. Ideally, what will happen? Only people who have got the login IDs and passwords, people who are internal users, they will get to see the data, right? What I want is, I want this data to be made public. So I want to create a public site where this data can be displayed. Okay, the data from any of the table that I have. Okay, so to do this, what I can do is I can create a force.com site. Now, what is a force.com site? Force.com site is something which can display your uh, public data, and this is a public site, which means anyone can access from anywhere. Okay, that person does not have to have the login ID and password. Okay, so making a public website which is connected in the backend, which is connected to your Salesforce database. That's what we are trying to do. Okay, so this force.com site actually allows you to do this in this. Right now it might be sounding a very complex kind of a thing, but when you do it with the force.com site, it is very simple to do it. Okay, so force.com site is the easiest way to do this. Okay, get this done. Now, when you create a site, what do we need? We need two things. We need hosting. Okay, we need to host our site on a certain server, and we need the domain name, or for your understanding, the site address. Okay, so we need hosting, we need the site address, and we obviously need the page that we want to display. Alright, so ideally we would require three things. If I want to make some data public and display it on the public sites, then I need the hosting, site address, and the page for it. Alright, so hosting can be done on force.com, so no problem with that. That's something which you do not have to worry about. Site address, Salesforce lets you take a subdomain. We'll create a subdomain on force.com. What is the subdomain? Subdomain is like this. Google.com is the domain. Mail.google.com. Now this mail.google.com, this is the subdomain. Okay, this is on the actual google.com domain. Got it? So this is the subdomain. Alright. So Salesforce allows you to create a subdomain on force.com. Like this is a subdomain on google.com. You can create a subdomain on force.com. So let's say your company name is ABC, you can create abc.force.com. So this subdomain is also available from Salesforce. You can create it. It's going to take a couple of minutes for you to create the subdomain. And then this page can be created using Visualforce. So I don't have to worry about anything. I'm actually creating a public site, but I don't have to worry about either the hosting, nor the site address, nor the page. Page you can create using Visualforce. We know Visualforce. Whatever you want to display, create it using Visualforce. Site address, register a subdomain using force.com. Hosting, force.com is going to take care of. That's it. Alright. So it's that simple, creating a public site here. So let's go ahead and create one. Give me a moment. Log into Salesforce. So we have logged in into Salesforce. Now what we have to do is just go ahead to setup and go to the quick find box and search for site. Right, straight away go to this and search for site. Okay, you'll see develop sites here. Under develop there is an option called sites. Click on this. Okay, now as I told you, first of all we'll have to get the address, and we also have to use the supplement from there. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so domain hosting we don't have to worry about, so it will be hosted on force.com platform. Address is something that you need to register from here. So here you can actually enter a whatever you are looking for, whatever unique address you're looking for. This has to be unique, right? So okay, now here because it's a developer edition, it is actually a subdomain on this long thing, but on a paid edition it's just going to be what you put here .force.com, right? First of all, check the availability. It has to be unique one. Yeah, it is available. So I say I have read and accepted. Register my force.com domain. So this is basically going to register the domain for you. Now your pages that you create and the ones that you want to make public, they will be available on this site, right? So it's going to register. It's going to take a minute or so to register the site. Now the site got registered. Yeah, now this is your domain. Okay, you can make your pages available on this particular domain. Got it? So this is your public domain. Now you just go ahead and create a new site. You can click on new and then you can create a new site. Okay. Before that, let me just look for a visual force page which I'm going to use for this site. Okay. Let me display this page on the public site. All right. Okay. So once you have registered the domain, click on new site, put a label and name whatever you want to put for the site. Okay. Now you have to put the address for this page. This is your site address. Now address for this page will have something added to this. So this becomes complete address for this particular page, right? From starting from this domain name slash the address for this particular page. Make it active. It has to be active, otherwise it's not going to be available to the end users. And decide on the active site home page. What page you want to display. Okay, this page should be developed using Visual Force. I have decided to take VF14 and display on this, so I'll just search for that. That is the page that I want to use. Select this, that's it. Nothing else needs to be done here. Click on save. That's it. Okay, so your site is ready and this should be available at this particular link here. So this is going to be the site address. See, this is my domain name slash the location of the page. So I've given the address for that. So this is the complete address where I should be able to see that page. Okay, I click on this, but I don't see any records. Now because it's a public site, you guys should also be able to see data in this. I'm putting it in the chat window. Can you just try to open this? Now you don't have to be logged in into this account, right? The data should be available publicly. So you should also be able to access the data here. So can you just go ahead and check if you're able to see the data in this? Let me know if you can see data. And I want everyone to click on that link and check that. You get to see the data? No? Okay. So then there is something which is still missing, which needs to be done on this. So ideally publicly, if you are not able to see the data, which means there is some more setting which needs to be done. Right. So now go back to the site again. Okay. In the site, there is an option called public access settings. Okay. So what I've done here is I've just created the site, right? But I have not defined the access settings for the site. So this page is going to be available to the users. That's fine. That's something which I've created. But on this page, what data should be displayed? What all things can be displayed on this page? That's something which I have not yet defined. That needs to be defined. Okay. So after creating the page, you also have to enable which all objects or tabs you want to display on this particular page, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the public access settings and click on edit. It's pretty much like edit a profile. Same thing. Go to public access settings. Go to the objects. Which object we want to display on the site? Accounts. Currently, there is no access for accounts. So if I want to display the accounts on the site, I have to give at least a read access on the accounts. Okay. Provide a read access on the accounts and then click on save. That is it. Okay. Now, can you guys just go back, refresh the page and check if it is working now? Just reload the page. Can you see the data now? Alright. So that's a small setting that you have to do. Just because you created the site or you created the page, the data will not become visible to your uh, users, or it's not be going to be available on the public site. The data by default does not become available on the public site. So what you need to do is, after you create the site, you just need to go back to the public access settings and give a read access on the records which on the objects which you want to display on that particular page. Like in this case, I wanted to display accounts, so give it a read access on that. In case I wanted to display contacts, then I should have given a read access on contacts. Alright, so whatever you want the public to do on your site, that access needs to be given through the public access settings options in the site itself. Fine, so that's how a force.com site can be created. So it's a very easy option. So it just takes a few minutes. Okay, so visual force is something that you already know. You can easily create a page, and then you can get your own subdomain and you can start creating a site. So this way you can actually have a public site which is completely connected to your database here. Alright, pretty easy to do that. Okay. Now, the next thing that we are going to talk about is exception handling. Okay. So the next concept that we are going to discuss here is exception handling. Now this is again getting back into the Apex code. Right? I told you that we are going to come back to Apex. So this is again related to Apex. Now um, in Apex, when you write the code, there will be errors and there will be exceptions. Can you tell me what can be the difference between an error and an exception? Anyone? What do you think is the difference between an error and an exception? Are both of them the same thing, or there's a difference between them? So error is basically an error which is, you know, which needs to be rectified. You know, if I talk from the programming point of view, till the time you do not rectify your error, you cannot save the code. Okay, so that's basically an error that you have made. Okay, exception is something which is not an error in your syntax or stuff like that, but it's basically an exception for some of the situation or some of the scenarios, right? Like it works, your code works fine for some cases and it doesn't work for some. Okay, that's what an exception is. Okay, okay. So what is an exception? An exception is a special condition that changes the normal flow of program execution. That is, it's when something bad happens that the program can't deal with during the execution. Okay, so something that has happened with the program is not able to deal with during the execution. Right. So something which has actually happened during that execution of the program, all right, and maybe some variable which needs a value and the variable does not have the value. Okay, so that's basically an exception. Okay, so what kinds of conditions can cause Apex to raise or throw an exception? So what can actually throw an exception? So here are the most common examples. Your code expects a value from something that is currently null. Okay, so common reasons for an exception can be, these. Let's say your code is expecting a value, but the uh, from something which is actually null at this point of time. Another scenario can be you're trying to perform an insert or update statement which fails to pass custom validation rule you have set. Okay, you're trying to insert or update a record, you're trying to perform a DML, but that DML is actually not able to happen because of some reason. Some validation is not correct or some required field value is not provided. Okay, assigning a query that returns no records or more than one record to a singleton as object variable. Okay, if you are assigning a query and the query does not return any records, or a singleton as object query returns multiple records. Okay, so while I'm writing a query, if I'm writing a query for a singleton as object variable, singleton as object variable will mean uh, an S object which can hold one value, but your query which is assigned to that variable is returning multiple values. Okay, so this can be one situation. Accessing a list index that is out of bounds. Okay, so you're trying to access a value in the list which does not exist. Okay, so in the list we know that every value has got an index number, right? So I'm trying to access the 10th value in a list, and the list has only 5 values. Obviously it's not gonna be able to fetch the 10th value. All right, so these are the common reasons for exception. Now what we need to do is we need to handle these exceptions. Now how do you handle this exception? So what we have to do, we need to write the code so that we can handle the exceptions, or at least catch the exceptions, okay, at the runtime. Okay, so to do this we use try catch finally statements. Okay, so to catch your exceptions, Okay, we can write try catch finally. Okay, now what does each one of them do? Try is basically the code, the generic statement that you want to execute, the code, actual code. Okay, so first of all, you try to execute the code. Okay, if there is an exception, code block can be used for catching the exception. Okay, and finally can have a code that you want to run anyways. Okay, whether the exception is caught or not caught, you can run the finally statement. So anything that you want to do after this, if there is an exception caught, the other part of the code which I anyhow want to execute, that can be written in the finally statement. Alright. So first of all, the try is executed. If everything works fine, the code directly goes to the finally statement. If there is an exception, it can catch the exception. Okay. And after catching exception again, it will go to the finally statement. So that's how it is. That's how it works. Okay. So this try catch finally statements are written to catch the exceptions and to work with them. So let's quickly understand about this try catch finally. The try statement identifies a block of code in which an exception can occur. So if you are expecting an exception to occur in one particular piece of code, that code can be written inside the try statement. Okay. The catch statement, so let's say you are expecting the error to come when a record is being entered. Alright. You know that there is an insert statement and there is a scope of error there. So that insert statement can be written inside the try block, so that whenever the user tries to perform that insert from here, I can write a catch statement which will catch the exception, okay, get the details of that exception, and I can display it to the end user. And then I can also have a finally statement which is going to perform the other part of the code. So a try statement identifies a block of code in which an exception can occur. The catch statement identifies a block of code that can handle a particular type of an exception. Okay, so this catch block is basically going to catch the exception for you. A single try statement can have 0 or more associated catch statements. Okay, for one try you can have 0 catch also, or you can have multiple catch statements. Okay, so if you are expecting multiple exceptions to be thrown during your try block, then you can have multiple catch statements associated with your try block. Okay, each catch statement must have a unique exception type. I'm going to talk about exception type, so don't worry on that. Once a particular exception type is caught in one catch block, the remaining catch blocks, if any, aren't executed. So I can write multiple catch blocks for one try block, and each catch block is going to catch one specific type of exception. Okay, so let's say there is one try statement and there are 3 catch statements that I've written. Out of these 3, if any one of the catch statement finds an exception, the rest of them will not be executed. Makes sense now? Exception has already got caught, so I already know that exception, so it's not actually getting into the other exception. Okay, so that is the thing. Once a particular type of exception type is caught in one catch block, the remaining catch blocks, if any, aren't executed. So the remaining will not get executed. The finally statement identifies a block of code that is guaranteed to execute and allow you to clean up your code. Okay, so now the finally statement, as I told you, this is guaranteed to execute no matter whether you got the exception or you did not get the exception. Okay, so that is the thing. A single try statement can have up to one associated finally statement. So for one try block, you can have one finally statement. Like you can have multiple catch statements against one try block. You can only have one finally statement against one try block. Okay, so that's how we actually uh, work with these exceptions. Okay, now the next thing that we have to understand is the exception type. So what are the different types of exceptions that we usually have. I told you in the catch block you have to define the exception type, right? Now the exception types that we have in available, which we can use in catch blocks, are: first is a DML exception. What is a DML exception? Any problem with a DML statement, such as an insert statement missing a required field on a record. So any problem with the DML statement is basically caught using the DML exception. List exception. Any problem with a list, such as attempting to access an index that is out of bounds. So I was just telling you that example. So if you are trying to fetch the 10th value from a list and this list only has 5 values, obviously the 10th value is not going to return us anything. So this is a list exception. Okay, I'm trying to retrieve a value from a particular list which actually does not exist. Null pointer exception. Any problem with dereferencing a null variable. So you're not actually trying to use a variable, but this variable is null. Variable does not have a value, and I'm trying to use that variable, that null, in some place in the code. Okay, something which we are getting on in the batch effects. If you guys remember, the variable was null, and then I did not assign the value to this, and then while I was executing the code, we were getting this exception. Alright, so if your variable that you're trying to use in the code somewhere, it does not have any value, it's null. Okay, so that's called a null pointer exception. So these are the exception types: DML exception, list exception, null pointer exception. Okay, while you're trying to catch the exception, you have to specify the type. So if you're trying to catch a DML exception, you have to specify this. Okay, query exception. Any problem with SOAP queries, such as assigning a query that returns no records or more than one record to a singleton object variables. That's called query exception. So any query, any problem with your queries, that's basically a query exception. Alright. S-object exceptions. Any problem with S-object records, such as attempting to change a field in an update statement that can only be changed later inside. Alright, so if there are certain rules which are defined on the S object and which did not allow you to make changes to the record, that is basically the S object exception. Alright, so let's say you're trying to change a field which cannot be changed or which cannot be updated. It is to be updated only at the time of creating the record. Okay, so that's basically your S object exceptions. Alright, so that is the thing. So these are the different types of exceptions that we have that we can actually catch. So how do we write this now? Okay, this is how it is written. This is how our try catch finally are written. Okay, so first of all, you are gonna use the try block. In the try block, you are gonna write the code that you want to execute. Okay, and that you expect can have exceptions. That part of the code should be written here. Okay, now next I am gonna write the catch block to catch the exception. As I told you, there can be multiple catch blocks. You can write multiple catch blocks, catch block 1, catch block 2, and you can define different exception types here. Okay, so exception type, and then you name it something. Okay, so let's say this is here you are expecting a DML exception, so you can write DML exception and give a name to that exception. Let's say ABCD. Okay, and then what code you want to perform here. Write the second catch block. It can actually handle a different exception type. One catch statement can only handle one exception. Okay, type. All right. Then you write the finally statement. Okay. Now this finally statement can be written. There can be only one finally statement against the try block. All right. So that is it. Now this is how you have to handle the exception. So this is the process of handling exception here. So let's say a very common scenario. I want to just catch the exact exception and I want to throw that, display that message to my end user while he's actually trying to insert the record. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to use a catch block to catch the exception. I'll get the message from here. Okay. I'll have the exception details stored in this variable, right? Let's say this is a DML exception V. I'll have this details stored in this particular variable, and then I can actually, display that message somewhere. Okay. Display that message as an alert or something like that. So that's how this exception concept is going to work. All right. So we are going to continue to discuss on this. Okay, how do we work with the code? So we have talked about exception, and we are going to also talk about other aspect of testing your Apex code before you can actually deploy the code. I'm going to talk about that in tomorrow's session. Now, please let me know if anyone has a question from what we have discussed so far today.